Hello, welcome to the Jaybe welcome to the Jaybe show on Revolutionary Blackout Network. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. Yes, I am back and we are ready to rumble. This is new era of RBN and I'm in a new location. So you guys probably saw this on the Savvy and JB show on Thursday evening. You guys know my entire housing situation. And so you guys know now I'm in a new location. So you guys can see that. And yes, so this is my first JB show in my new place that I live, my new home. So yes, so that's why if anything looks a little weird or anything looks a little off or different, like I'm in a different location, is because I am. So this is not green screen. Like, hello, like this is not green screen. Anyway, the JB show is every single Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you guys have not already, you guys can also go to revolutionaryblackout.substack.com for the email notifications whenever we go live. So just like whenever you guys get, those notifications from YouTube, if you guys don't want to do that, you guys can actually go to our Substack and get put on the email list as well. So you guys have that there. Also, if you guys would like to email us and you have any inquiries or any things to share, any news that you would like to share that may be of interest to us, then you guys can go to revolutionaryblackout@outlook.com for that as well. As per usual, whenever I have a guest, and yes, I have a guest, I slipped up. But whenever I have a guest, I like to say a blanket hello to everyone that's watching in the comments. Also, when we get to our next story, please make sure to also vote in the poll as well. But I would like to introduce my guest today, Andre Farmer, who is a housing specialist. Hello and welcome to the channel. It is so good to have you. You're muted, Andre.
Thank you, JB. Really, really pleased to be here. I'm a huge fan. As I've said, been watching you guys for a while now, and I'm very excited to take this opportunity to talk with you about housing. I know you do a lot of great work on it as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm a housing specialist here in New York City, and so I'm working with, among the most vulnerable population, adult males, age 18 to 65, history of homelessness, substance use disorder, and severe mental illness. So we administer services at our state licensed residential treatment facility.
So in a sense, you're doing the Lord's work, right?
Well, it doesn't pay a whole lot, but yes, it is, important work, and I couldn't be more honored to be contributing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you, especially now, is as far as the housing that you have seen so far. Of course, in New York, it has some of the highest housing rates in the country. Here in Florida, I think Florida's among the top 10, and we're growing right now. When you encounter people who do not experience a lack of housing, how would you speak to them when they say, well, people just need to be more ambitious, they need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, or these people need to get off the drugs? What do you say to those people in your field of work?
Well, that's a great question, and I do get a lot of that. Some of this kind of narrative is internalized by the clients that we work with. So I'm glad you asked that question because it is a popular, like I say, narrative floating around. I would just tell them, a simple fact, which is during the 2023-24 period, the Institution for Children, Poverty, and Homelessness reported on May 30th that the peak of that period, 32,570 children in New York City DHS shelters.
Mm.
And so that is directly correlated to, poor outcomes in the STEM fields, science, math. The children don't really have a fair shot in a lot of these situations. So a lot of the basic necessities that are tied to housing and is being neglected for many of New Yorkers. And so I would just say it's hard to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, so to speak, when you can't really reach your potential because you're fighting for basic needs on a day-to-day basis.
Well, and it just goes to show that, and because I wear many different hats of identities, one of the most overrepresented groups that are unhoused are LGBTQ youth who are put out because of their orientation or gender identity. And so you encounter many of them, some of them below the age of 18. There's still minors that are living unhoused in these different areas. Do you have any experience with LGBTQ youth who are either under 18 or over 18 that have experienced unhoused situation?
Absolutely. I'm working with a client right now, and it's really difficult dealing with some of the intersectionality that we're seeing at the organization. And so just to answer your question, yes, we're seeing it. Of course, like I said, we're dealing with 18 to 65 adult males. And so, a lot of them have some of those issues coming in regards to that intersectionality of homelessness, poverty, and, hate crimes, discrimination, domestic violence. And so our line of work is definitely is acting in awareness of these things. And we have a program, HASA, which is it services HIV and AIDS, individuals living with HIV and AIDS, and we try to place them housing in addition to all of the case management services that we deal with to address some of the traumas, the PTSD that go into a lot of these clients' experiences and backgrounds. So definitely support that is catered to that population for sure.
Andre, what is one of the primary components as to, if you can give us a bit of a list from 30,000 feet, what is one of the primary components that leads people individually to homelessness? And I'm not saying it from an individualistic perspective, but I'm just saying, what are some of the underlying causes that you have been hearing from the people who you've been serving?
It's definitely going to be employment and income in general, but for the majority of us, vast majority of us, is employment income. That has been the theme that I'm seeing based on my experiences, during the time I've been working. And so We have vocational counselors there to assist with that, but in large part, you say 30,000 foot take. I would say that a lot of it is tied to a lack of employment opportunities for these individuals in these vulnerable populations. Education, vocational training, which leads to sustainable employment. I see the strong connection between that and long-term successful, placement in affordable housing.
But Andre, the employment rate is 3.5%.
Right, and so they don't have the type of measurements to track, the reality for most New Yorkers, which is they're severely underemployed if they're employed at all, right? A lot of the metrics that the Department of Labor and a lot of these economists that they use, these indices, it doesn't really reflect, as a lot of the viewers that watch your show know, the criticisms of this argument, right? They don't account for workers who are not seeking employment because they're just not, they don't have marketable skills, for example, or they're not finding their way into these measurements for a number of different reasons. And so, yeah, the underemployment is a big thing, the gig economy. I know clients here that are working full time or as many hours as they can, and it's not at the pace of things like rent prices. So the majority of renters all across the United States are rent burden, paying 30% or more. And so it's not necessarily about, the literal statistic of people who can be classified as employed, but rather having those kinds of jobs that are conscious, providing these kinds of jobs, being conscious of the fact that people have living expenses, not least of which housing.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to share with our guests, the people that are watching, is when you say underemployed, some people may not know exactly the definition of that. According to Merriam-Webster here, it says underemployed says having less than a full-time, regular, or adequate employment. So really, when you look at it, it's really that the people have jobs, but it is nowhere near enough. And a lot of times people will say, well, it's full-time. Even with full-time employment, you can still be underemployed if you're still not making enough money to cover your living expenses. So, like, for instance, people will say, well, how many people out there have you met that are unhoused that have full-time jobs?
There's quite a few. In terms of unhoused, a lot of them are, a lot of the clients that I'm working with, they're, engaged in vocational programs and things of that nature, like I mentioned, to try to actually get in the door and get their, get one job, right, or an internship or things of that nature. We have people in the construction trade who, have to bounce around and try to find employment that is really not stable and secure. So in that sense, they're underemployed. And then we have clients that are in these gig jobs who they're going on delivery, doing installations and maintenance, different jobs that don't amount to the kind of income that is expected to afford the kind of quality of life in an expensive city like New York.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Zoya came in and she said 40% of unhoused are employed. Another question that I also had for you was, as far as the unhoused that you serve, are they only the ones that are physically out on the street, or are the unhoused in different other type of living situations, but they're still considered unhoused?
Well, I mean, the clients here we're a residential treatment facility. And so this would be one of those situations where, we have clients who we provide these services of room and board, so to speak, and everything else in between to make sure that they're in the proper environment for recovery, because it's mainly dealing with substance use disorder. But at the same time, it's difficult. There's the traditional transitional housing, I should say. There's different networks for that, and that has a lot. They do a lot to provide those services, those accommodations for placement for people that are in between shelters and like I say, adequate housing.
Yeah. It's actually interesting. Jacqueline says some men may have to flee their homes because they are trying to escape from a violent and abusive partner. It's not just women who go through these situations.
That's right. I had a client who, stabbed by his girlfriend, but didn't actually get it reported, or I should say he didn't press charges. And part of that may have something to do with the stigma and some of the, ways that, it's become politicized, or, but definitely men that I've worked with experience these things. And, there's different programs and subsidies that try to address domestic violence victims to make sure there are provisions for them in terms of the rental assistance.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed, I feel like you're going to be more busy in the next coming years because the homelessness rate is increasing, which I guess for you is like you have work, but it's not in a good way. One of the reasons why I say this is because there was an article that came out of Axios, and thank you. And it says homelessness in the U.S. jumped to record level in 2023, government says. So this was back a few months ago and early in 2023. Talks about estimated number of people experiencing homelessness in the United States. It has actually jumped. It says U.S. homelessness has reached a record high in 2023, according to the data from federal government released Friday. It says homelessness increased by about 12% nationwide since last year, and it rose across all household types. The Department of Housing and Urban Development said in a new report. About 653,100 people experienced homelessness on a single night in 2023, according to an annual count done in January. This year's result is the highest number of people reported as experiencing homelessness on a single night since reporting began in 2007. So it says Black, African, and Indigenous people were overrepresented among the population experiencing homelessness, as has been the case for previous years. Black people made up 13% of the population in 2023, but they made up 21% of the U.S. population living in poverty, 37% of all people experiencing homelessness, and 50% of homeless people in families with children. says Asian and Asian Americans have have the largest percentage increase in homelessness, up 40%. So this is an untenable. Then it goes, Hispanic and Latinos had an uptick of 28% from 2022 to 2023. Families with children saw a 16% increase in homelessness. So, I mean, you know, it is really just a deeply unsustainable system that we have been seeing, just these facts alone. And can you just give me more of just your personal feelings about this uptick trend, and what do you see as the solution for curtailing this trend of increased homelessness?
It's a big deal, and I would just say, you know, to start out, that it's not just in the United States; it's a global problem. I worked with the UN Habitat organization when I was in university, and we worked on their global panorama, which is their housing database, and we found that this is a global trend, and that, you know, after COVID-19, they saw the way we reported the ways in which, you know, the housing crisis definitely was exacerbated by that global viral pandemic, and it exposed the lack of provisions, legal, you know, provisions, policies, standards, practices. But I would say, you know, in terms of my experience, my outlook, I'm definitely encouraged by some of the people, my peers, you know, those who are really fighting in the movement to deal with affordable housing and the crisis here in New York City. We had the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, which is really important. It was actually approved by the Senate on May 20th, and the legislature found, you know, that a lot of that stuff was preventable given the lessons learned in after 2008. That, you know, when it came to them wanting to address the decline in rent payments, but realizing all of the speculation that was going on. And so another one would be the Community Land Act, which is really important. That's going to give community land trusts, or CLTs, more space and more resources to be able to get that right of first refusal, so to speak, where they can come in and purchase any sort of building that's on community land, right, and deal with some of that speculation and you know, dominance from, you know, entities like the Real Estate Board of New York, who have a stranglehold on the market.
So one of the things that I was thinking about also recently was there was a report that came out. Rome was actually talking about it on here yesterday. Was that the FBI raided the corporate landlords of RealPage, their facilities, because of their price gouging of renters across the country. Do you think that something like that could have a domino effect in improving the numbers so that it will lessen the amount of unhoused people that we have? Or do you feel like it's just wholly inadequate as far as what it aims to do? Do you think it could kind of soften the blow, so to speak, as far as the uptick in homelessness that we see?
And you're talking about the there was a conviction, or you said? I'm sorry.
No, there was the FBI raid
Ah,
on the corporate landlord companies that are artificially inflating the price so that they can make more money. And so I was just asking, do you think that could soften the blow
yeah,
for the
that
uptick
would
in
definitely help. Yes, I mean, it's definitely about profits over people at this point, and New Yorkers have made it clear that they understand who's influencing a lot of the legislature. We were just protesting outside of Governor Hochul's office, talking about her ties to the real estate industry, why they needed to have renters protections in the bills that they were passing, which were absent. And they actually rolled back some of the renters protections that were there um, for 15 years. But yeah, I think it's going to need to be coupled with the things that I mentioned, right? Some initiatives like the Community Land Act initiative, and and building upon and developing the TOPA, the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, which I said did pass. But it's definitely going to have to come from working people as well. The construction and development of new affordable housing units is woefully inadequate, and it has to do with the way that the government here in New York is
Mhm.
wanting to straddle the fence, so to speak, between the real estate industry, the market, and the public investment. So, you know, construction workers, maintenance workers threatening to go on strike. I know the
Mhm.
maintenance workers are teaming up with 1199 SEIU, the healthcare workers, and they're letting them know like the housing is tied to the employment. And if we're if we're serious about this, we're going to have to make sure that the people can get employed where they're living, and so that they don't, fall under. And it has to be a holistic approach
Yeah.
with collective efforts throughout sectors between tenants and working.
Yeah, one of the things I also wanted to share was, and let me share this really quick. Shout out to Roger Meadows for this. One of the things that he shared with me was from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. This actually gives snapshots of different areas of how much you have to make in order to be able to afford a two-bedroom apartment across the country. I just went to New York because that's the state where you currently live. And in New York, this is the number fourth most expensive state in the country. And it says in New York, the fair market rent for a two-bedroom apartment is $2,084. In order to afford this level of rent and utilities without paying more than 30% of income on housing, a household must earn $6,948 monthly or $83,375 annually. Assuming a 40-hour work week, 52 weeks per year, this level of income translates into an hourly housing wage of $40.08 per hour. So you need to make $40.08 per hour in order to be able to afford a two-bedroom apartment in New York. And we're not just concentrated to Southern New York, in New York City and in the boroughs. We're talking about the entirety of the state of New York. So when we talk about how, and this is the most expensive areas, but it just shows that this is why we are experiencing a uptick in homelessness. This is untenable. These rates are extreme when it comes to how we are unable to afford our housing costs. I can go to my state here in Florida. Florida is another one. Florida is really it's horrific, and exactly what I just went through. Florida's number 11, so is you have to make $30.59 an hour just to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Florida. And
what is the most? What's the most? I think it's like Rhode Island, right? Is the number one or something like that?
Number one, I'll show you because I haven't memorized.
Connecticut. It's one of them.
Hang on.
The cost of living for the family, yeah.
Wait, hang on. Oh, here we go. Hawaii's number 2. And number 1, I think it's California.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, California is doing a lot of great things with their efforts to push back on this stuff. And, New Yorkers are learning from some of these movements, and, the construction workers, like I said, that are really, really criticizing openly the governor and the mayor in terms of their lack of, like I say, provisions and protections for wages, right? When they're dealing with the subsidizing of the affordable housing, right? So the 421A tax abatement was a tax break to the wealthy corporations and the developers. And that had expired after a long time in New York. And so Governor Hochul just passed a replacement one called the 485X. And that's another tax abatement. But again, it's the onus is on working New Yorkers, right, to pay for this stuff with taxes. And so we're subsidizing the market to make housing affordable for us, and they're getting something for nothing, so to speak, by not actually paying working people what they're worth when it comes to the construction workers, and not actually providing affordable housing. So, the AMI, which is the area median income, is the index that they use to measure, the any given area of population, the income, but it's largely manipulated so that, what's considered affordable housing is like what you were showing, like 60, 70K a year, between 70K and like 180K, they're calling that affordable. And so when you see the housing lotteries and things of that nature, it's like a lottery to get affordable housing, which is subsidized by working people that they're priced out of.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was, are you familiar with the housing first model that a lot of people are talking about?
Yes, I've gotten some, strange faces here at the treatment facility, right, where we were talking about the ways in which they're using treatment to be a precursor for housing. The housing first model is something that I would argue for needs to be, considered when it comes to dealing with the shelter population, who, we're dealing with substance use disorder and the mentally ill, mainly when it comes to those in recovery, battling addiction.
Yeah.
We're looking at how housing may be a good way, a housing first approach. It's already been demonstrated that leads to successful, outcomes in terms of long-term sustainability in lasting in affordable housing. So
Yeah.
I definitely recommend it to in a way open up the conversation and confront some of the stigmas around people that are low income, people that are dealing, the most vulnerable of us,
Hmm.
questioning whether they need basic human right like housing, um, whether tacitly or indirectly when we're dealing with treatment first models as the only way forward, which is you know
Absolutely. In fact, just to give people a little bit of a background on what Housing First model is, I defer to a comrade that by the name of JT Chapman. He has a channel called Second Thought. He actually talks about Housing First model that has been employed in Finland. So let's take a look. And I'm not going to do the entire video. I'm just going to do this small part, but this gives everyone in the audience a background of what we're talking about.
Homelessness, what Housing First is, and what it could mean for the American economy. In Finland, only about 5,000 people, 0.1% of the population, are homeless. And that's even with the broadest definition of what constitutes homelessness, which includes more than who you typically think of when you hear the term. The Finnish definition of homelessness goes beyond just those who are living on the street or in emergency accommodations like shelters. In some cities, like the country's capital Helsinki, no one sleeps on the street. That type of homelessness has been completely eliminated. Compare that to the US's nearly 600,000 homeless people, which is almost exclusively so-called rough sleepers, those who live on the street, and the problem starts to become apparent. What's more important, though, is that homelessness isn't just low in Finland, it's actively going down. Between 2010 and 2018, Finland enjoyed a massive 40% decline in the homelessness rate. If it sounds
First of all, let's ask this question. What if you saw a 40% decrease in homelessness?
I would be alarmed, but not surprised at the same time because
Yeah.
I know too much. But yes.
Yeah. I would be thoroughly happy to see homelessness go down by 40% in 8 years. Let's continue.
Sounds like we're cherry-picking data, even during the pandemic, which, let me remind you, has caused a massive surge of homelessness in the US. Homelessness in Finland did not increase. So what happened? How is Finland so effectively reducing homelessness? In 2007, the Finnish government started a national Housing First program. Housing First is a philosophy that argues that to make progress on homelessness, particularly chronic homelessness, you need more than temporary emergency solutions. You need permanent housing right out the gate. In other words, housing is the starting point, not the end point.
That is what it is. So for people who say, you got to get treatment first. Hang on, let me put this up here because I want people to see my face. They'll say, well, you got to get treatment first, or you got to get a job first, or you got to get all these different little itty bitty things, and then you can have housing. No, my sweet summer child, you need to get housing first. Let me ask you, just for the audience sake, right? In order for a baby to have a place to live, do they have to work for their housing first, or do they just get the housing first and then they can grow from there? See, that's the thing a lot of people just do not think about, is that you need shelter in order to be able to get all the other things that you need in order to be able to progress. If you or I were stuck somewhere in a forest or jungle somewhere, what is the first thing that we need to do in order to survive? We got to build housing. Whether you get some sticks together, some big leaves, to put over yourself or what have you, that's the first thing you need in order to be able to survive. So therefore, if we can apply that to whenever we go, where we're in the wilderness, if we can apply that to whenever we have little babies, why can't we apply that to adults that we have in our lives right now?
I totally agree. And, the good thing, Jaybe, is, people are starting to change the conversation, when the stuff hits the fan, so to speak, people start getting some act right. And so the Office of Policy Development and Research, this is federal department. They did a review of the Housing First, a review of the evidence. I just want to share some brief bullet notes here. They said, several studies have found that compared with the treatment first model, Housing First approaches offer greater long-term housing stability, especially among people experiencing chronic homelessness. The second thing they found was that some studies have found that Housing First programs may also reduce costs by shortening stays in hospitals, residential substance abuse programs, nursing homes, and prisons. I would be out of the job, so to speak, but I think we have a higher potential as human beings to address this. And it says, research suggests that Housing First programs successfully house people with intersecting vulnerabilities, such as veterans and people with a history of substance abuse, mental illness challenges, domestic violence, and chronic medical conditions such as HIV and AIDS. So I think it's becoming part of the conversation in terms of the ruling class that they have to deal with this stuff, because the inhumanity of it all is becoming too obvious.
Yeah, and one of the things that I wanted to add was that when people talk about the unhoused and how, oh, well, they're on drugs, or oh, they don't have a job. My thing is that you got to remember, a huge chunk of the people who are unhoused didn't start their substance abuse until after they became homeless. You see, when you're in a stressful situation, you need to self-medicate in order to be able to deal with what's going on. How do I know this? How many of y'all get a drink after work because it's been a rough week? Are you doing the same thing that somebody that's homeless does? Yeah. Right? And so when it comes to having to deal with things that are rough, sometimes we as humans turn to different substances in order to be able to deal. It's called self-medicating, right? So really, the gateway drug to homelessness is trauma.
That's right, and that's why, as a housing specialist, I can administer groups, every week, multiple times a week, so that we can unpack a lot of that trauma that is there as a part of the human condition. This is what we do. We process things, in the ways that are available to us, and a lot of the times it leads to trauma, and so we have to address it and talk about how to overcome that and incorporate that into recovery, dealing with some of the barriers to approaching housing, in a healthy way, and arming them with information, right? And dealing with that trauma above everything. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Ultimately, a housing first model would alleviate a lot of that heaviness of that trauma, so that it's like, okay, I'm in a stable place, and I got to purse my words carefully because we're on the tube. But some people who are homeless also have to take some of these substances so they don't fall asleep. Because if you fall asleep and you're homeless, then you're more vulnerable to people attacking you or people taking your stuff. So it really is a means to stay vigilant so that they don't lose whatever they have too. So when you start to think about it in those different terms, you start to realize, this is really a systemic problem. And like I said yesterday, you cannot fix systemic problems with individual solutions. It just doesn't work that way. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just remarking and agreeing with you. It doesn't work that way. It just reminds me of the quote from Hegel. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. He said, "Secure at first food and clothing, and housing, I would add, and the kingdom of God will come to you of itself." But just that, notion of addressing people's basic needs and giving them the acknowledgement of a human being, to say, you're a human being, you need housing. Simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I also have one more question that I would like to ask you. As far as, because I know we try to talk about solutions, as much as I possibly can. What is your opinion on tenants' unions and curbing the scourge of homelessness in this country? What is your thoughts on that?
I encourage every renter to join a renters union, renters association, anything like that will give you guys a sense of community, right? If you have one of those available to you, definitely do that, because, like I said, we were just outside of the governor's office, and tenants are angry. They understand what's going on, and a lot of this will come from, the need for politicians and the legislators to save face and to legitimize their roles in the society. And so, if the mass of people can have that wherewithal to say, look, working people are unionizing, we as consumers of rent, rentals, and apartments, we ought to have that same solidarity, right? Rather than, a lot of times what you see on the local news is they really try hard to, perpetuate and promulgate this narrative where we should be fearful of our neighbor, and they're the squatter, and you would be a successful landlord, but you would have to deal with these squatters and these low-income people who don't want to pay for rent. And so, I would definitely say that solidarity is going to be the key to this among renters in New York who are all rent burdened. The majority, vast majority, 60% of New York is rent burdened and paying 30% or more. They got to be conscious of that, that collective interest, right? The commonality of their interests, and learn from what's going on in the these different labor movements. I mentioned 1199 SEIU, where it's huge labor union. I think 450,000 members all across the country. And so very, very important to build momentum by, like I said, bridging the gaps in areas where we can see is ripe for collaborative efforts.
Absolutely. Well said. One of the things that I wanted to share with people is that since I think I saw Nick in the chat earlier, but KC Tenants, right? KC Tenants actually does great work on the ground, and they are a organization that helps, to keep people housed. And so they are wonderful when it comes to the issue of housing. As they say, organizing for safe, accessible, affordable housing. So this is just one in Kansas City, Missouri, that if you would like to, you can get involved with them. I encourage other people to get together with other different tenants and renters organizations within their area, within their communities, so that we can push to build dual power to make housing a human right. Because ultimately, I always say within the capitalist system, housing is never regarded as a human right. It's regarded as a commodity, it's regarded as a privilege. And so I think that's something that we can work towards if we actually organize, not just mobilize, but organize and actually work towards building something that is sustainable for all, not just for a small few. So, yeah. So as far as what you have coming up, any different new programs, any events that you have coming up, can you share that with us, or where they can find you?
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of events, I'm really just, a lot of my work here is done here at the organization, at the facility. I am a realtor, so I try to use my real estate license to place low-income renters in affordable housing. But I would shout out the New York City Community Land Initiative. They're really pushing for the Community Land Act. I think that if that really took hold nationwide, we would have a really different picture for housing. It would really defang a lot of the speculation, the investors who are not living in these housing units, right? But are having all the control. Yeah, I would say the Section 8, that wait list had just opened up between the 6th and the 9th. You guys have until 11:59 to put yourself on that wait list. The NYCHA, the New York City Housing Authority, that is the biggest administrator of the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. So I strongly encourage, 150,000 New Yorkers signed up within 24 hours. So went on the 6th. By the 7th, it was, and they have 200,000 slots in the wait list. It was gone for 15 years. They brought it back. It ends tonight. So everybody sign up and, go and build relationships with these public housing authorities in your neck of the woods. Get in touch with a housing specialist like myself if you're interested in navigating some of these programs. It's not just Section 8. You got, city FEPs and a number of different state FEPs, a number of different voucher programs to help, families who need that basic human right of housing.
Yeah.
But you can find me on Instagram. It's Andre Manigault. Let me get that right for you. Yes, Andre Farmer Manigault. on Instagram and on Twitter. You can catch me at real_TOR_mentor, MENTOR. And I'm out in the streets, with the people fighting for housing.
Gotcha. I just need to ask you of one thing. Before you go, is it possible for you to answer a question from Rockman?
I'll try my best.
Okay. All right. So I want to make sure I get this because if not, then Roger will have me sleeping with the fishes. So let me make sure I get this really quick. Thank you so much for the tip on Rockman. Roger, he says, Jay, don't let him go without asking him if he'd be interested in getting together to make a New York State a CBI state for amendments. We can fix these problems in our state and succeed where the Dems have failed. So, first of all, just that.
I'm always up for something like that. Yes, DM me and we'll definitely have that discussion any way I can contribute. I'm definitely open to it. So we got some resources here at the organization. We're networking constantly. So yes, reach out.
Nice. Okay. And then the next one says, thank you for this tip as well, Roger. He says unions are strong in the state. They're the reason why we don't have a single payer healthcare system, single healthcare via New York Healthcare Act. Says Jay, the National Low Income Housing Coalition told me that their 2024 Out of Reach project report will be available on June 27th. Brother, I need to bring you together with Public Bank NYC. We are pushing for the New York Public Banking Act, which would allow municipalities to charter their own public banks. Well, yeah, I think that would be great. And as far as public banks are concerned, I've become more of a fan of them now because especially how they can build infrastructure that could be also public housing infrastructure that could be used for the people. So anything to house human beings, I am all for as long as it's done with them, their dignity in mind.
Yeah, the community land trusts that are going to be the future, right? They're going to need some financial resources and institutions that can, provide that institutional capacity to, provide the space for them to grow. So we're going to need banks in the community for sure.
Definitely. Thank you so much for coming on, Andre. It was such a great conversation.
Thank you so much, Jaybe. I'm really, really honored. Like I said, I love what you guys do at RBN, and I'm really pleased with how this went. Invite me back, please.
Yeah, definitely. We would love to have you back to have these conversations, and to talk about different news stories too, because I think that's really important to be able to have for people who are really on the ground, who see these things in their face. I think that's important to get your perspective as well.
Thanks again, Jaybe.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Okay, everybody. Now, my apologies for not having that update, for having him on the thumbnail and the title. But yes, that was Andre Farmer. He is a housing expert. And look, the thing is that that's one of the things that I think we need to address as much as we can in this country, because housing is such a major issue. And it is a growing pandemic that we have. Yesterday, while we were running errands, we passed a car. It was a van. And the doors on both sides of the van were open. And there was somebody sleeping in the van. And you can tell that that person was living out their van. It shouldn't be. And we have a duty as human beings to make sure that our fellow human beings do not experience that ever again. Because in my eyes, being unhoused is a form of violence against the person. So please make sure to give Andre a follow for that. Thank you very much to everybody. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. That pushes us out into the algorithm so we can get more subjects like this, more stories like this out to the greater number of people, because we have to raise the conversation. We have to elevate the conversation, because ultimately there's too many people that are suffering in this world, in this country. And so, yes, thank you so very much for that. Going to be going to the chat, say a few hellos and salutations. All right. All right, so here we have Hero for Hire says HBCUs owe billions of US dollars from government US. They owed billions US dollars from government. Okay. It says most professional rookie of the year got drafted, broke into a multi-billion-dollar industry. Interesting. Roger Meadows says, question from my fellow New Yorker on Rockfin. We went to that. Thank you so much. Thank you for the super sticker from Jacqueline. Jacqueline says, what is the situation with social housing or, I have to ask this, I'm sorry. What is the situation with social housing or council housing in the U.S.? Have developers or private landlords brought up social housing, and is that housing being replaced? Well, I can tell you this right now. There are some cities and states that are trying to do some social or council housing, but it really requires you to jump through specific hoops first in order to be able to get the housing. Whereas what me and Andre were talking about, the housing first model, means you get housing first and regardless. So then everything else follows behind it. So the getting clean off of different substances that you may be abusing, that follows once you have permanent housing. People who have permanent housing, are able to easily get employment because they have a house, they have an address, they have stability, so therefore they can get a job. And there's so many different things, like even mental health. One of the things that I saw was that there was there's always higher rates of the rate of congestion within a emergency room is higher because you have homeless people who are coming in, and either they're experiencing health issues or they just need a bed to sleep in. And if you fall asleep in a hospital bed, who's coming to bother you? Nobody from outside. The police aren't coming to bother you. And so you fall asleep and you're actually able to get some rest. And so if we give people housing first, imagine how much the wait times will drop if you do not have to have it more congested because unhoused people are just trying to find a safe place to shut their eyes. Thank you very much for that. Roger Middle says, white-collar crime and government corruption should make up 85% of FBI investigations, not going after activists. Agreed. Wolf Spirit says, what a great channel. Working poor got a raise in pay. Everything going up. Just wait for the mass starving. Food prices have exploded too. Yeah, food is extremely high. Extremely high. It is. It's horrible. Wadi says there was a story on CBC about an Ontario-based housing first program that went awry. To be fair, it was focused heavily on the perspective of the landlords who signed up and felt they were ripped off. See, that's the thing. If you do it via landlord for landlords, it's not going to last. But if you do it for the actual people, it can be something that can last. Good to see you, yay. And Joseph says, hello, everyone. All right. Thank you very much, Retro Gamer. Says, glad the JB show is finally back. Yes, thank you. All right. Did I? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I checked the Rumble. And I think we're good. Let's go back to the Rock Fin first before we continue. See, good thing I looked. All right. Roger says, thank you very much for the $2. He says, what you and Savvy are doing by elevating people who are actually doing on the ground work is way more important than having the celebrity commentators on. Keep up the good work, you two. Thank you. Thank you very much. Also, by the way, I got to give shout out to Zoya for also setting this up. So, Zoya, you're a real one. Thank you. Says whether he was having Andre on, Sabrina having the Muslim principal from Chicago on, or having the guy from Sudan or the lady reporting on Haiti or Nelson Betancourt on, elevating the no names over the names should be your brand. I agree. Because the thing is that ultimately the people who are on the ground actually know what's going on more than even some of the people who are well known. So I agree with you, Roger. And I want to try to have more names of people who are on the ground as well. Because we got to talk to each other more. And what better way to do it is through independent media. So thank you, Roger. All right. So what are we talking about today? Well, we already had Andre Farmer on, and we're also going to be talking about the red line. Yes, the red line was drawn by the people yesterday, and this is why we have Genocide Joe and Butcher Blinken on the thumbnail. We're going to be getting into that, and also we'll be talking about college athletes, the NCAA. Yes, college athletes are having a big payday. This is a story I wanted to talk about a couple of weeks back, but because of the big move, I had to postpone this story, but I wanted to talk about it. So, yes. So, there was a protest yesterday. This protest was a pro-Palestinian protest that really was massive yesterday. So massive that it really got quite a bit of press. So I'm going to share that with you guys. They surrounded the White House. Let's get into it.
Monitoring the situation at the White House, where protesters are demonstrating now, calling for an end to this war. News Nation's Alina Sharari live at the White House. Alina, what are we expecting to see today? It looks like you've got a big group behind you.
Laura, good to be with you today. Yeah, a lot of people bussed in last night as well as this morning from across the country to be here at this protest. They're calling the Red Line protest, where we know that people will be lining up in a red line to represent the red line they say Biden has not drawn in this war. But as you mentioned, Laura, it is a very sizable crowd. Over the past hour, we have seen the numbers really start to swell here. You can see that is where that stage is, and that is where we expect to hear some speakers. But the main action, again, as I mentioned, in front of the White House, you can see that barricade set there to protect the area. Again, organizers of the event saying Biden swore the invasion of Rafah would serve as a red line for the administration. But as the invasion of Rafah has continued for weeks, organizers here saying Biden's red line is nowhere to be seen. We know historically Biden had said he would stop the flow of military aid to Israel if they did, in fact, cross that line. Reporters asked about that in a recent State Department briefing, really pressing the administration. Here's a little bit from that exchange from the administration's point of view.
So with respect to the policy that the president announced, he was speaking specifically to a large-scale operation in Rafah, and we have not yet seen a large-scale operation conducted in Rafah. That said, we have seen strikes that put civilians in danger well before the president said that, and we have made clear to the government of Israel that we expect them to do everything that they can to minimize civilian harm.
Hold up. They're moving the goalpost. Oh, well, there's invasion in Rafah, then yeah, that's our red line. Invasion of Rafah happens. Guess what? Oh, well, it has to be a large-scale invasion of Rafah. Please keep moving the goalpost even further. There is no red line with Joe Biden. Biden and Blinken, they basically are really just giving Israel a blank check to massacre people. A blank check for mass murder. That's what this is. Make no mistake about it. And so now you have people saying, you don't have a red line, but we do. And so this is why we're coming out in full force to put you, Biden, and you, Anthony Blinken, on notice. You guys need to know that this is our red line. And if you are crossing our red line, it is curtains for you, politically speaking. And so that's one of the reasons why this is happening. Because the United States is like a parent that allows their spoiled kid to get away with whatever they want. And then every single time something happens, then they go to the State Department and they go, well, Israel did this horrible thing. Well, we've been speaking to Israel about this. We've been in communication with them. If my kid suddenly broke all the windows, tore up all their clothes, took a bat to my car, am I going to say, I had communication with my child? What do I look like to you? You had over $3 billion a year is given to Israel. You want to know how they can fix that attitude? You take that money away. See? Problem solved. But they don't want to do that. Let's continue.
And the State Department also said it was not the IDF's intention to kill people, to kill civilians. It was their intention.
Bullshit. I'm sorry. I'm trying not to cuss, but that's a bunch of bull. 35,000 so far that they have counted. 35,000. And you mean to tell me, oh, well, Israel, the IDF, the IOF, they didn't actually mean to kill. Look, I'm boo-boo the fool. None of us are. We know exactly what you're trying to do. Like some dude saying, well, I didn't mean to have sex. I didn't mean to sleep with her. It was an accident. What? You cheated on your wife with another woman and you said, oh, it was an accident. I fell into her. These people think we're stupid. They think you're dumb. The Biden administration thinks you are an idiot. They are insulting our intelligence to our faces. This is why there are thousands and thousands of us on a weekly basis that are out there risking ourselves arrest just so that we can say to the Biden administration, you need to stop this now. Oh my gosh. Will I be able to get through this? I don't know. Pray for me.
People, to kill civilians. It was their intention to kill 2 IDF military people, which they said they have successfully done in that strike. But again, we know that a lot of upset and discontent with what has been going on here with the Biden administration, of course, as we near an election as well, Laura.
Sure. And, I imagine that the tone maybe has changed a little bit with the news of the release of those hostages this morning. So what are protesters hoping will happen after today? Are they making demands?
Yeah, Laura, they're asking for a ceasefire. They're asking for the release of Palestinian prisoners. We actually spoke with the organizer of this event who tells us Biden's goalpost keeps moving, and that's why they're so unhappy. Here's a little bit from that exchange, Laura.
It's clearly wordsmithing and maneuvering to try to avoid accountability of the U.S. population. What they define as a large-scale operation, the goalposts keep moving. I'm pretty sure that over 36,000 dead, and there's thousands more unaccounted for under the rubble still, is this large-scale operation, bombing schools, bombing refugee tents with U.S. weapons, both the school and the tents.
Again, we know that there's been a large swell of people starting to gather here, and there's actually over my left shoulder, if we can pan, a sort of line formation and march starting to take place, Laura. So again, we have started this protest about 5 minutes ago officially, so we'll continue to see what protesters do and what they say here in Lafayette Square, again, right outside of the White House, Laura.
Thanks for.
It is more than just a ceasefire that people are demanding. When you have people out there protesting like this, they want more than just a ceasefire. The ceasefire is the basement of the demands. An end to the occupation and apartheid, and the right to return for all Palestinian people. These are some of the demands that must be met. The protest will continue until Palestine is free. That's basically it. Let's take a look at some other images that have been happening. I just want to share this with you guys too. So there was the red line that was shown, and they literally made a red line. It's big. It says happening now. The White House is completely surrounded by a red banner as Palestinian protesters declare their red line. This is the moment the two ends of the red line met on the southwest corner of the White House complex. So they legit surrounded the White House. Let's get into it. So that's the red line. They said that they were going to put a red line around Biden. Oh, they did. Boy, I'm telling you, they did it. Now, Breakthrough News also was covering this quite extensively. They actually shared the numbers of people that are actually out on the ground. Let's go here. Let's take a look. So as you can see there, thousands in the streets in Washington, D.C. as of yesterday. And so it was huge. And I think that it got a lot of attention. This next video, I'm just going to keep speaking, but I think it's important that people realize that ultimately, like one of my comrades said, she said, the governments may be with Israel, but the streets are with Palestine. So, and it's just, that is how massive these protests are. People are sick and tired of seeing children being dismembered on their screens. They're sick and tired of feeling the heartache of these parents or feeling the heartache of these kids who have lost their families. And so this is why people are marching the way they are right now. And the mobilization needs to be more stronger in organizing, in my opinion, because ultimately, yes, we can protest, but the problem is that you're just screaming. The thing is that when screaming turns to action, that is when it is stronger, in my opinion. And so that's when I think that's what's necessary for us to do. There was something else I wanted to share. They got even more intense. I'm going to be honest with you, but this intensity it reminds me of what Dr. King said. He said, a riot is the language of the unheard. And so, yes, here it is. I thought I got to be careful with how I share this, but I want to make sure that you guys know that they got lit in Washington. So this is from Raw's alert says, breaking, thousands of pro-Palestine protesters and activists are lighting off smoke bombs and flares as they plan to surround the White House. Currently, D.C. Metro Police are on high alert as hundreds of thousands of pro-Palestine protesters and activists have gathered outside the White House in Washington, D.C. as they light up smoke bombs and flares as they protest for Palestine, planning to surround the White House. Police have deployed mace into the surrounding crowds, and crews have erected a large anti-scale fence around the White House in anticipation of this week's Gaza protest. So let's take a look here.
Zionism has lost. Israel has lost. But our many have remember that Blinken was the butcher of Gaza, and history will show that Gaza will not be defeated. History will show that victory is for the
U.S. Palestine Communities Network. I just want to say, free Palestine! Free Palestine! The U.S. Palestine Communities Network.
So you guys get the picture of how big it was. And then I'm not going to play the video, but I will read the tweet so that you guys get an extensive view of what really happened. So this is also from Raw's alert says, pro-Palestine protesters hold up a bloody mask depicting President Joe Biden while burning an American flag as the statue gets graffitied. It says at this time, currently hundreds of thousands of pro-Palestine protesters and activists have gathered outside the White House in Washington, completely surrounding it. It says, as pro-Palestine protesters have tagged a Washington, D.C. statue with graffiti while throwing items at park police as they held up a bloody mask depicting President Joe Biden, while another protester burns an American flag behind him. The statue outside of the White House has been sprayed with FJB during the pro-Palestine protests, with tensions rising. So I'm going to have to skip past a little bit of it so that you guys will see. But yes, some people are with the Hamas headband. Some people have the PFLP headband on. The PFLP is a more secular Palestinian resistance fighting group. So there's about 17 of them in Gaza that are fighting. It's not just Hamas, but one of them is a communist group. They are secular, so it is not just all people who are Muslim that are fighting against the occupation. It's also secular Palestinians that are also fighting against the occupation too. So yes, this is how intense it has been. And so that was a lot, but it was to reflect about, the red line that Biden has refused to draw. And really it's because he does not want to draw a red line. And so this is one of the reasons why it is so important for us to not only mobilize, but to organize to be able to stop this genocide. And this genocide also feeds into the genocides that are going on in Sudan, as well as Congo and Haiti. And so this all connected. So I just implore everyone to continue to keep speaking out against these genocides. Do not stop speaking about them. Also try to mobilize and organize whatever you can in order to stop these mass murders happening, because these are our fellow human beings. And I just want to say, good on the protesters for demonstrating how they do not want to see more people dying at the hands of Israel with our federal dollars, because ultimately it makes us complicit in this, and we do not want to be complicit in that type of action. So yeah, so that's what happened yesterday. Go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. That pushes us out into the algo. Thank you very much. Before I get into the chat, just want to give a thank you and a shout out to all of the patrons on Patreon. Without you guys, we would not be able to do this type of work. You guys make this happen. We're literally trying to do the work of not just talking about what needs to change, but also being the change that we want to see. So this is how we do it. You guys allow us to be able to bring the news to you, to bring this information and education to you, so that we can put forth not just this, but also do the work on the ground as activists, as organizers ourselves. Even though we may not be very huge, right? That's not the primary concern. The primary concern is doing the work and encouraging others to do the work as well. Because ultimately, we're all we have. We save us. So thank you so much to all the patrons on Patreon, and we're going to try to get that list updated for the month of June. So I'm going to go to the comments in the chat, and then we'll move on to the next. We'll go on to the next story. And the next story is actually going to be a positive story. I wanted to end on a positive story, so we'll get into that. All righty then. So let's go to The Rock. The Rock, my friend. All right. So thank you for the tip, Roger. He says, James, as long as you have some thumb, share your bust your neck for wait, what? Bust your necks for the next 3 months. I do not want to see you complain about the heat. Next time you come on, you better be rocking the baldy on your head and face. Also, when it comes to the man, at the end of the day, you're still dependent upon a politician. Could it be for you rather than ourselves? It is important that we use leverage to get what we want. He says, damn, speech to text. Supposed to say, as long as you're dependent upon a politician to do it for you rather than ourselves, this will continue. Agreed. And yet, look, it is hot, Roger, and I am not trying to go outside. Look, where I'm living now, they have a gym. I'm gonna go to the gym on the inside, and I'll get my workout on there. But I am not going to be going. No, it is. Can't do it. I'm supposed to melt. Look, I'm chocolate, baby. I'm supposed to melt in your mouth, not in your hand. All right, so let's get to the rest of the chat. Oh, jeez. Did I miss a super chat? Oh, Roger says, Rock's supposed to say, as long as you have hair above your neck. Got it. Okay. That makes sense. Thank you so very much. Savita says, I swear the protests were very peaceful. We got home and saw this one woman getting heckled by the police. Yes, many resistance groups and even Hamas. There are atheists and socialists too. Yes, there are atheist Palestinians that are fighting and resisting too. See, it doesn't. See, that's the thing when people talk about, oh my God, it's because we're Jewish and it's because of our religion. No. I'd be willing to bet that there are Jewish Palestinians that are also resistance fighters in Gaza. There are probably some that are Christian too. And there are probably some atheist Palestinians. And they all have solidarity together in their fighting. Young Black Economist says, pro-Biden, pro-Israel, pro-racist segregationist supporters. John A says, I like your plant, JB. Thank you. Thank you. I haven't named it yet. I'm trying to figure out when I'm going to name it. But thank you. All right. Let me see. Let me see. Trying to get to. Look, Raj, I'm not gonna shave my head bald. At least not yet. Once I realize that my hair is thinning, once I realize my hair is thinning, I don't know, I don't think it is. Once that starts to happen, then yeah, I'll do that. But nah, I'm not doing it. Jacqueline says, JB, I thought this was a family show. It's supposed to be, but you know. Yes, Matt John says Jesus was a Palestinian Jew. Yes. Zoya says Jews are used by Zionists. Majority of Zionists are Christian. Remember, centuries of the Crusades. Yeah. And it's just like how you have a lot of Christians, evangelical Christians, that are being used by the far right in order to advance their agenda, which is an anathema to what real Christianity is. Just like that is the same way Zionists that are Israeli are using Judaism as a tool to cover themselves for the horrible crimes that they're doing. Netanyahu is no different than a Timothy McVeigh. Timothy McVeigh was a Christian that mass murdered a bunch of people in Oklahoma City. What's the difference between Timothy McVeigh and Benjamin Netanyahu? There's no difference. The thing is that they are trying to cover themselves over with a religion that's peaceful and accepting, but they're using it to browbeat people over the head with so that they can use it for settler colonial advances. And you have thousands and thousands of Jewish people that came out and said, no, not in our names. You will not be committing this atrocity in our names. Many of those people who are Jewish are friends to RBN that have said, no, we reject this type of treatment to people. And it's people like, for instance, you have Max Blumenthal, Aaron Mate, you have Katie Halper, you have Lee Camp, Eleanor Goldfield, right? You have Gaijin Girl. You have all these different people who are Jewish who are saying, no, you do not do this in our name. We want people to be accepted. We want people to be peaceful. And we want the Palestinian people who have lived there for hundreds, if not thousands of years, to keep their homes and do not steal what they already have. If you want to go and live among them, fine, because Jewish people have been doing that for forever. There have always been Jewish people in Palestine. Some of them are Palestinian, and some may have been Jewish that just transferred there. Fine, but don't take the land that people have already been on. If you want to live among them, fine. The problem is the land theft and the apartheid and the illegal settlements. That's the issue. Palestinians have been living, Arabs and Jews have been living together in harmony for a long time until the Nakba. And we can get back to that. It's just the Zionist occupation has to end. Anywho, let's continue on to the next story. This is going to be a good news story. I want to get into this. So there was a story that I want to get into because I got a hard stop at 3 p.m. So let's get into it. Okay, I'll do this. So this is a story about college athletes. It says NCAA signs off on deal that would change landscape of college sports paying student athletes. This is a positive story. In fact, hang on. I forgot to put this up. Yes, NCAA college athletes. Let's get into it. So NCAA signs off on deal that would change landscape of college sports paying student athletes. The blurb says a nearly $2.8 billion settlement to antitrust claims could mean millions of dollars to athletes as soon as fall of 2025. I really wanted to talk about this story a couple weeks back, but because of the move, I'm not able to. But I'm talking about it now. This is a good thing. Now, if you guys have not already, please make sure to take that poll. I'll check the poll right before we end. But I personally think that, yes, student athletes should get paid for their labor. Those games that they have to play are labor. I don't care if you're track and field. I do not care if you're swimming. I don't care if you're a football player. I don't care if you're a baseball player. It doesn't matter. You are doing labor and you are drawing in crowds for people to watch, and they're paying money to see these games. Therefore, you deserve a cut of that money. Let's get into the article. So it says a major change could be coming for college athletes. They may soon start getting paid. A tentative agreement announced on Thursday by the NCAA and the country's 5 biggest conferences to a series of antitrust lawsuits could direct millions of dollars directly to athletes as soon as fall of 2025. The nearly $2.8 billion settlement, which would be paid out over the next decade to 14,000 former and current student athletes, is an important step to the continuing reform of college sports that will provide benefits to student athletes and provide clarity in college athletics across all divisions for years to come. The NCAA president, Charlie Baker, said in a joint statement on Thursday night with the commissioners of the ACC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, the Pac-12, and the SEC. It says the federal judge overseeing the case must still sign off on the agreement, but if approved, it would signal a major shift in college sports in which students would play for compensation, not just scholarships, exposure, and opportunities. So, as you can see here, it is not just for, oh, well, people see me, play, therefore I'll get notoriety. No. That's going to translate to your bank account too. It says this landmark settlement will bring college sports into the 21st century, with college athletes finally able to receive a fair share of the billions of dollars of revenue that they generate for their schools. One of the lead attorneys for the plaintiff, Steve Berman, said, "Our clients are the bedrock of the NCAA's multi-billion-dollar business, and finally can be compensated in an equitable and just manner for their extraordinary athletic talents." Says the NCAA and power conferences call this summit a roadmap that would allow uniquely American institutions to provide unmatched opportunity for millions of students and write the next chapter of college sports. So this is going to be very interesting. So for a while, when this was first brought up to my attention, that when I thought about it, I should say that these college athletes do not get paid at all. I'm like, where does all that money go? Shouldn't they be paid for this? But yet they don't. And you got some of these college athletes that also have to have a job in order to be able to afford, school. But yet they're working as well to help make these schools billions of dollars? That ain't right. So let's continue here. One of the things that I wanted to get into was this article here. Really quick. So this says, analysis, who is winning in the high revenue world of college sports? Says the issue, the U.S. hyper-commercialized system of college sports, which does not exist anywhere else in the world, is in a period of overarching transition and deep financial crisis. A select share of Division I college athletes produce billions of dollars of revenue every year for their schools. Almost all of this revenue comes from football and men's basketball. And yet, expenditures by college athletics departments are such that, with the exception of a small number of schools, athletic expenses surpass revenues that are the overwhelming majority of Division I programs. The median salary of the head football coaches in the Division I football subdivision, FBS, is above $3.5 million, along with the handsome perks and bonus provisions. So one of the things I thought about was, how much do these coaches make? Because the athletes aren't making anything. If the athletes aren't making anything, what are the coaches making? Let's get into this, because this is one of my biggest issues. If the coaches are making money off of their labor, why can't the athletes? So here we go. This is a list of the 15 highest paid coaches in 2024. So let's go to number 15. Brent Venables from Oklahoma makes $7.25 million. $7.25 million. And his athletes don't make a dime. Something ain't right. Let's continue. Let's go down. It gets worse. Billy Napier from Florida makes $7.3 million. Next one. Luke Fickell from Wisconsin, $7.6 million. Mike Gundy from Oklahoma State, $7.75 million. James Franklin from Penn State, $8.5 million. Mark Stoops from Kentucky, $9 million. Josh Hupel from Tennessee makes $9 million. Eli Drinkwitz from Missouri makes $9 million. Lane Kiffin from Ole Miss makes $9 million. Hold up, wait a minute. Let me ask y'all something. What is one of the poorest states in the country? Isn't Mississippi? If Mississippi is one of the poorest states in our country, why is it that the coach from Ole Miss is making some of the highest salaries in the country? Something ain't right. So that's number 8. Brian Kelly from LSU making $9.9 million. That's crazy. Mike Norvell from Florida State, $10 million. Lincoln Riley from USC making $10 million. Kalen DeBar from Alabama making $10 million. Alabama is literally one of the poorest states in this country. And you got a football coach making $10 million a year? And your players don't make a dime? Hold up. Let's continue. Top 3. Ryan Day from Ohio State makes $10.2 million a year. Kirby Smart from Georgia makes 10.7. And then number 1 is from Dabo Sweeney from Clemson, makes $11.5 million a year. From Clemson. And the athletes who are doing a lot of that work, most of that work, they're not making anything? I was curious because I was just like, well, how much does an average professor make? And I went to tenure professor. I didn't go adjunct. I went tenure. So here you go. Just go on the Google machine. It says as of May 31st, 2024, the average annual pay for a tenure professor in Florida was $64,915 a year. Just in case you need a simple salary calculator, that works out to approximately $31.21 an hour. This is the equivalent of $1,248 a week or $5,409 a month. Now, some people may say, well, that's not really true. They actually make more than that. Well, of course. Let's go to salary.com. Here on salary.com, a tenure professor it says here, how much does a tenure professor make in Florida? The average tenure professor salary in Florida is $91,223 as of May 28th of 2024. But the range typically falls between $73,000 and $125,000. Salary ranges can vary wildly depending on the city and many other important factors, including education certificates, certifications, additional skills, and the number of years you have spent in your profession. But yes, they aren't making anywhere near what these coaches are making. That ain't right. I'm running late. So what's going on with these students is I hope that they make every cent that they can because it is not right for them to have to not make what they should. And here's a few points that I was thinking about. These college athletes, who come from working class and poor backgrounds, if you are paying them now, they can actually support themselves financially. Because not all of these athletes come from, middle class or upper middle class backgrounds. So especially a lot of the black and brown students who make up a lot of these football teams and basketball teams. These coaches are making millions while the players are earning nothing. And now you see the division, the gulf between the tenured professors and the coaches. So Rome made this point last night. He said they should pay the players who worked in the past based off the money that they made for these schools. And I completely agree. If you are a player that has made money for these schools within the last 15, 20 years, then yes, you should get a check. And then if a student gets injured, it risks the scholarship. That's not right. And this is why I say all higher education should be tuition free. And having that will also help students focus on their studies. You can lower stress and have better mental health. Says if college was tuition free, how many students would willingly be athletes in college if they weren't able to make it to the pros or be financially stable? I want to share this too. Hopefully they'll give me a 5-minute grace period for the meeting, but this was a video on them being able to use their name, image, and likeness. I don't have time for that. But yes, they should make money from their name, image, and likeness. One of the reasons why I say that is because of this. You share. Because EA Sports is making money off their name, image, and likeness. College Football 25 costs $69.99 at GameStop. Are these three young people, are they getting compensated for that? No. They should get a cut of the check. So yes. There was a video that I wanted to share as well. Did I lose it? Hang on. Okay, yes. And this is going to be pretty short, but I want to share this too. This video is titled, How Much Money Do College Football Teams Make for Their School? So this is going to be interesting. Let's go.
Thing that we talked about, the LSU academia has released the amount of money that has been made by all of its sports. Not they, I guess some guy that worked there released the 2016 or 2017 numbers. Yeah, 2016, 2017 cycle. When you hear things from athletic directors, like football allows us to have other sports, this is what they mean. In 2016 to 2017, the LSU football team profited $56.097 million. Okay. $56 million that football team generated for Louisiana State University. The men's basketball team made $1.619 million. The baseball team made $569,000. And then every other sport in LSU's catalog lost money. Gymnastics, softball, women's basketball, women's track and field, men's golf, women's golf, volleyball, women's soccer, men's tennis, beach volleyball. Cost $704,000. Women's tennis, women's swimming, men's swimming, the list goes on. And I understand how you could flip this into saying, well, it's impossible to pay college student human athletes because of all the sports that are losing money. And that's an interesting way to look at it. And I can understand that argument. The way I look at it, though, is that football team made $56 million for that school, and their players saw $0 out of it. That is wild. But it's not fair to pay the players because we don't make money. Well, who's it not fair for? Who's it not fair for? The football team that is making the money for every human? Are the football players that are out there potentially catching CTE and potential shoulder injuries for the rest of their lives and putting their lives on hold when it comes to everything else for LSU, making $56 million, winning football games. I couldn't even imagine what they made this last year, winning the national championship, probably $70 million, $80 million, and none of the players could see a single dollar because all these other sports stink at marketing themselves.
So basically, they should make money off their labor. And that's how it should be. Enough said. So I think this is a great thing. Any college athlete deserves to get paid for that. So if you got ticket sales, guess what? If you get sales from ad revenue, from whether it's ESPN, whether it's Fox Sports, whether it's CBS Sports, ABC Sports, what have you, then you guys deserve that part of that revenue too. And these coaches should not be making that much. I'm sorry, but they shouldn't even be. I mean, gosh, they should be making a fraction of what they're making. Even if these professors made, between $500,000 and $700,000 a year, that's way more than adequate enough. The rest of that money needs to go to the players. Basically, that's what needs to happen. But this is why we need to just change the entire system, because the system is untenable. I'm going to go to the chat really quick, and we'll be heading on out on that note. But thank you very much. Like, share, subscribe. Thank you so much. All right, so let's go to The Rock. Okay, we're good on The Rock. All right. And then let's go to the rest of the chat. Roger, you God's gonna get you for that one. How many wanted to see Jay rock the baldy? 1 for yes and 2 for no. Roger, I'm gonna get you for that one. I'm gonna get you. All right. Tim Price says market themselves. The college does that advertising. They choose to prioritize football, then maybe some baseball and basketball. It's not the cycling team's fault that the college won't market. Yeah, I mean, honestly, they should be doing more of the different sports, but they stick to football and basketball mostly, and then do a little baseball, and then these kids don't, these other sports don't get as much notoriety. Sebastiano says they should be grateful for the opportunity. Some rich guy somewhere. Yeah. And honestly, I think that's a bunch of bull. So yes. Atomic Ray says they don't need that much money. So the taxes to be avoided, the money should go to retirement accounts, like 15% of your contracted work. I would agree. Starting a retirement account for all these college students so that they can actually have retirement early. Rick Solis says these guys get paid more than the governors of their states. That's crazy. And aren't these guys at public schools? It's wild. All right, guys. So I got to go. But I'm going to bid you all adieu. I will be live on Tuesday for my Roger. I got to get going. DM. Yeah, I got to get going. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. It was a great okay, I'll cover that on Tuesday when I get a chance, Roger. Thank you so very much. But I just want to thank you guys for tuning in. I'll see you guys on Tuesday on my channel. If you guys would like to, that's linked in the description down below. Look, like I always say, water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found it, and do all the things if you got them. And I will take care. You guys take care and have a beautiful day. Love you very much. Mwah. Forehead kisses. I'll see you in the next one.